This is Will Tchakirides interviewing Benjamin Shaner for the HBCU Radio Preservation Project. It is 2:06 p.m. on December 14th, 2023, and this interview is being recorded in the Elizabeth City State University Library in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Okay, if you don't mind, can you please state your full name and what your role was at the WRVS radio station?
Benjamin B. Shaner, Jr., and started there in 1987. I think I was their first full-time engineer. Station signed on in, I believe, in 1986, and the engineering firm ran it until they got me hired on to take on. And that's when I began there, and slowly began to work for other stations in the area, working for that same engineering firm that helped to build this station. And I was working for them, and they just continued on a contract basis, serving, Elizabeth City State University and other radio stations eventually in the area. And I became the engineer for several radio stations in this area in southeastern Virginia, Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, Norfolk. But it was a ride.
Well, before we get to your career, let's start at the beginning. Can you say a little bit about where you were born and raised and the people who raised you?
Well, I was born in Norfolk, Virginia. My folks had different jobs and what have you. We lived in various places around Virginia Beach mostly. Graduated school there. Went into the Air Force in 1972.
What were your parents' names?
Benjamin Sr., and my mom's name was Louise. And they were from the Lynchburg area. And they had a lot of family up there. We used to get up there and visit quite a bit in the mountains. It was nice up there. But,
what'd you like about visiting your family's place in Lynchburg?
The mountains and the woods and my grandparents and great uncles and all the family up there mostly.
It's a big family?
Nice. Yeah, they were kind of scattered out now, but there was a pretty good group there in Lynchburg at the time.
What kinds of activities would you do as a family when you went out there?
Well, they were mostly country folks. There was fishing involved and some hunting. And since it was mostly on the holidays, there was gatherings and feastings, as it were. And, seeing aunts and uncles and cousins that you only got to see a couple times a year and that kind of thing. I guess it's pretty much the same for everybody when they get together. It's holidays, hopefully you get together with your family.
Yeah, definitely. You like fishing. Is this something you still do?
Yeah, as much as I can. I've spent quite a bit of time fishing, and it has become my pastime for sure. And actually has been throughout all my jobs and career.
When you're not working, would you say it's your favorite activity, leisure activity to do?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as much as possible, like I said. But the weather, kind of dictates when you can and can't do things like that. But it wasn't too hard working it in between radio jobs.
Are either of your parents still with us?
No, they've both passed on.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what they did for work or during the day?
Well, like I said, my dad had various jobs, and eventually he took a home course in electronics. And in taking his course, I used to help him with it, help him with the projects, learning soldering and how to make connections, and quizzing him on the testing and criteria and such by the time he finished his course, I was maybe like 11 years old. And I knew quite a bit about electronics at that time. I'd already built several little small crystal radios and that kind of thing, and some tunable. So I had an interest in that sort of thing early on. And I guess the interest stayed with me for a while. Of course, once you get up to be a teenager in Virginia Beach, you tend to get down to the beach and find a surfboard somewhere, and that takes up a lot of your time.
Oh, you got to tell me a little bit more about life as a teenager in Virginia Beach. Surfing, what else?
Surfing, for us, skateboarding a little bit at the time, but it was brand new. And yeah, it was mostly somebody would get a surfboard, and we'd get down to the beach and take turns on the surfboard, several of us riding it, until eventually we got older and everybody got their own surfboard.
Around what year are we talking? What time period is this?
From the late 60s to the early 70s. Yeah, and as we got driver's license, we started coming down to North Carolina and to Nags Head and Cape Hatteras, because the surf down in that area is much better than it is in Virginia Beach on average. And so this area wasn't strange to me by any means. I've been coming down here since high school. And but joined the Air Force and, well, went into electronics in the Air Force and radio communications, and just been in it ever since.
Before you joined the Air Force, did you like to listen to radio? Were there any programs that...
Oh, sure.
You liked?
Sure. We used to listen to all the stations and all the kinds of music, and rock and roll. And I remember particularly I might bring some of the 45s up to the mountains when I would visit them, and kind of introduce some of the folks up there to a little bit of rock and roll in the late 50s. And, well, it went over real big with the kids, I know that.
What would the folks have been listening to instead of rock and roll?
More of I don't know, Perry Como, Bing Crosby. I'm trying to bring in Fats Domino and Little Elvis. And
Okay, so you joined the Air Force. Do you recall what year roughly that was?
I joined the Air Force in '72. Vietnam War was still going on.
Yeah.
It had a schooling to go through, and wound up at an Air Force training base.
Where was that located?
In Columbus, Mississippi. And we spent our time there working with transmitters and receivers and control tower equipment and most everything to do with communications at an airport. Ground communications, that is. Never worked on the aircraft, was never interested in flying. Really kind of had an aversion against it. That's why I chose ground radio in the Air Force. I stayed on the ground. Tell
me where your travels during your time in the Air Force took you.
Oh, Mississippi for 4 years, and they just left me there. And I decided after that in '76 to go ahead and get out and try to make my fortune. You see how that worked out.
No, so in the Air Force, describe the people you were around and, the friends you made, and what did you do for fun while you were in the Air Force? Well, in Columbus, Mississippi, there wasn't a lot to do there besides work at the Air Force Base and fish the rivers and lakes, and there was quite a bit of hunting going on at the same time. And so I got to continue that quite a bit down there. Got a little better at it, and wasn't just chasing bluegills and catfish anymore. Joined the bass club for a while, tried that, but it didn't last too long for me. I'd just rather get out there and fish. I'm not in a contest. I meant to ask, did you have any siblings? No, we didn't. It just turned out that way. No brothers or sisters? Okay. I have a sister, but I haven't seen her in quite some time. Okay. So you went through the Air Force in the mid-'70s, and you were working more closely with radio and equipment as you went. What did you do immediately after when you got out professionally or academically?
Yeah, when we got out, our family was still here in Virginia Beach, and so we came back to Virginia Beach. I got a job at the NBC station here in Norfolk, AVTV, Channel 10. Everybody here knows about that. Worked there in their engineering department for a few years, and then opportunity to come along to work with naval communications equipment, overhauling UHF and VHF equipments for the Navy. And so went and did that for a while. And that lasted a good while, maybe 10 years or so. We get into the late 80s or so, and they lost their contract. And I kind of got out of the work. And when I was looking for work, I got a call from an engineering firm, said, "Do I want to be an engineer at a radio station down in North Carolina?" And by that time, I was already living in Currituck. It kind of become crowded up in Virginia, so we were moving south, keeping away from the crowds. We were living in Currituck. So this station was probably the first one, I believe. And then we got another station over in Edenton. And the engineering firm already had this station in Moyock. There's a 100,000 watt station in Moyock. So I was an engineer there for a while as well. And eventually the engineering firm went on in a different way. And for a short while I was out of work. But I got a call from a radio station, wanted me to come back and work for them as their full-time chief engineer. So that was that 100,000 watt radio station in Moyock, close to home, right there in Currituck. So I had that job for a while. Since I had left this station, with that engineering firm had left, and I was gone for a couple of years, I think 89 and 90, and got a call from Edith Thorpe, the general manager. She knew me from before, and she wanted me to come back and be their station engineer as well. So that's what I did, and began to develop a little side business, as it were, and then it grew into a smaller thing where I didn't have the full-time job anymore. I was just contracting out to local stations here in North Carolina.
So you mentioned Edith Thorpe, so that's here at WRVS, right?
Yes.
And you kind of came on first contracting, kind of part-time more so than full-time?
Yes. At first, there were very smaller stations just coming up, just 10,000 watt radio station at the time. We were 41,000 watts now. And David Linton was the original first general manager of the station, helped to develop and get it on the air. And I did come to work for him at first, and it was working great. But Mr. Linton had greater opportunities, and he left us, and Edith Thorpe became our next general manager.
You're talking about the wattage. Can you, in the most layman terms possible, help me understand how radio wattage works, the kilowattage, why it matters, the size?
Well, the amount of power and the height of the antenna will determine the range of your radio station. You've got to have really both to achieve what you really broad umbrella of coverage, and like the shorter the tower and or the lower the power, the shorter that umbrella and smaller that umbrella is going to be. Of course, you might start out with bringing a station on the air in an area where there is none, but you can only get in and on a small umbrella before you might interfere with other stations. So you start out small, and as things change, other stations may go away, you get the opportunity to grow. And that's what happened here.
So when you started working here at WRVS, roughly how many contracts are you juggling at one time or at any given time as you're working through?
I suppose when I was working for myself, it was probably only maybe 4 or 5, I think. But when I was working for the engineering firm, it was twice that many, and really spread out down through Columbia and Manteo and Edenton and on up through Virginia Beach.
So when they call you in, what are they asking you to do?
Well, engineers got routine responsibilities to visit the station and make sure everything is operating properly and within the parameters of the FCC's requirements. But outside of that, you still get calls because of station failures or equipment failures. It might be as simple as a tape machine is eating tapes, or the transmitter just won't work. It's down. You never know what it could be, but you got to get out there and find out what it is. And it could be any time of day. It's pretty much stations want to be on the air 24/7, so that's what they're looking for from you, 24/7.
What are some of the biggest crisis moments you've seen in that world of engineering that you've worked in?
Well, I suppose lightning strikes cause some of the worst problems, for sure. It affects transmitters, it can affect studios, it can affect anything and everything in between, just about. And it was a problem at this station when they first signed on in '86. And I think when I came on in '87, they'd already been hit twice, where they had lost, some equipment and had to get these things fixed already. So I remember researching and coming up with an attachment for the antenna that would help reduce static buildup. Knock on wood, it's been a long time they haven't had any serious lightning strikes at the transmitter.
Has there ever been a major fire or anything like that? Flood?
Well, that would be the next worst event that we experienced. Yes, there was a fire. It was in the Williams Hall, kind of across the hall from the radio station in the music department. I believe a music director had a lot of, I guess, paper music in the office, and it caught fire. And so a lot of paper burned up in this one area, but it got into the HVAC for the whole section of that building. And so everything in the radio station was covered in like 1/8 of an inch of soot at least. And I mean everything. And when you open things up, it was all film, just soot was everywhere. So we had to just shut everything down and just completely clean that up. Of course, first thing we had to do was get our station back on the air because there was no broadcasting from inside that studio. So we set up some emergency facilities over in our telecommunications building, where we also had some TV studios that weren't being used at the time. And set up there, a temporary station, just sitting on tables, like cafeteria tables, but we made it work for like the 6 or 8 months while we cleaned up the other area. And I took all the equipment out of there, every bit of it, took it over to another facility here on campus and literally scrubbed it with soap and water and brushes and cleaned it up and blew it out with air, baked it in the oven dry, and put it all back together, and everything was good.
Wow. When was that?
1996. Fire in 96.
And no other fires since then?
No.
Good. Now, as an engineer, did you have any mentors, or was there anyone who in the business who helped you get to where you wanted to be?
Well, yeah, the original engineering firm that I worked for.
What was the name?
Fine Tuning Associates was their name. They were in Virginia, I think in the Roanoke area, the Richmond area, and in the Norfolk area. Having groups of engineers in each place, and the ability to call on, for projects when the studio was being built or something. We could bring in an engineer from another area for a weekend or things like that to increase the productivity for a while. But eventually, like I say, they went in a different direction. And but the guys in charge of that, they gave me my chance in radio, my first chance in broadcast radio. I'd been in, like I say, military communications for the most part. All this time I had worked at Wavy TV for a while, which is broadcasting for sure, but it's not radio broadcasting. And so they gave me that chance, and fortunately I already knew enough to just grab it and go.
Circling back to the military for a second, what made you want to join? Was it a recruiter? Was it just the only option? How'd you get involved?
Well, at the time we had a draft, and President Nixon invited me to participate.
So you got drafted?
No, I did. Yeah, I got my draft notice. Well, the way it worked at the time is you can join any force you want up to a certain date, and at that date you would be joining the Army if you had not joined any other armed forces. And I originally wanted to just go into the Navy, as everybody in this area pretty much thinks about, I suppose. And but it was a joint recruiters station, and as I went down to talk to the Navy guy to join up, Navy guy was at lunch, and the Air Force guy grabbed me and talked to me first. And he just said all the things I wanted to hear. And then when I talked to the Navy guy to carry out my original plan, I found out they didn't have the opportunities that the Air Force had.
How did it feel to get drafted? Did you have any hesitancy? Were you scared at all? What did you feel?
Well, this was 1972, and I can't say that I wasn't hesitant. Sure, I had a lot of friends. They weren't going. They didn't get drafted. They didn't want me to go. They wanted to come up with some alternative, and I decided no, it was the right thing to do. It's what you got to do. So my dad served. I served.
What branch was your dad serving in?
He served in the Navy,
Navy.
During World War II. And fortunately, he came through okay. And his brother, my uncle, also the same. He was in the Navy for a while, and then got out of the Navy and went into the Air Force for a while. My uncle. And but I guess a lot of people were making a different choice, but I couldn't do that. Didn't want to do that.
Okay, jumping back to your engineering career. Why don't you tell me a little bit about how, and you can do it from a technical standpoint, but how did the radio industry, how did this station itself change over time? What changes did you see from start to finish for you?
Well, there was the power increase, of course, and when I first got into radio, CDs were pretty much brand new item, and radio stations, for the most part, they weren't equipped to be playing equipment using CDs. Everybody was still using, for the most part, they used tapes. You buy a record, but a lot of people played records. We play a lot of records here, But then, with a lot of the things that, as you probably know, a lot of the things that get a lot of airplay, they put it on cart or something like that, so that they just play the tape. They don't sit there and play their record hundreds of times and ruin it. They play the tape. And but there were CDs that come along, and so we had stations all over the place pulling out the old carts for and putting in the CD players here and there. And of course, it was brand new at the time, and the sound was quite noticeable on the air right away. You could hear the difference. And then, of course, that had to be done at all of the different stations that I worked at over and over again. And it stayed that way for a good long while. I guess somewhere in the 90s, computers began to creep in more and more with automation systems available that weren't much more than a jukebox in a computer at the time, but they've become much more than that now, and they've got software programs that can run multiple stations of multiple formats all simultaneously from one system. But it happened slowly. It wasn't overnight, and it was a learning curve for everyone, really, for us with the equipment, and then for everybody that had to operate it.
Did you like the music that the station played? Was it were you a
Sure.
fan? What were they playing when you were working?
Well, every station I worked at played pretty much different stuff, but I've got rather eclectic music tastes, I guess. I never heard too much that I didn't mind here and there.
Yeah, give us a little tour, station to station, and what some of the genres were that you were listening to.
There was like a station down in Nags Head called Surf 106, and they called themselves the Boss of the Beach. And they were a big 100,000 watt station down there, and they played, well, I guess what you would consider beach music, sorta. At least trying to cater to the crowd vacation crowd at the beach. And there was, of course, this station here, which had a mixed format. They've always been
R&B? Or
well, R&B throughout the day, and sometimes at night. At times, especially when we would have some student operating the station and having their own little shows that could get a little bit unusual, you might say. But we would have religious broadcasting in the morning, most every mornings. And that was always very popular. We've had some very popular DJs, very popular in this area. And
can you name any of them?
Greg Sampson would be one of them for sure. And Randy Jones. He was the guy if you wanted something to do with sports, but he was really our afternoon guy. But he was also sports director, and he loved sports and football. He also served as a referee in the afternoons, for the school programs locally. And sadly, both have passed on. But
Take your time. It's a close community here.
they were my friends.
Yeah.
They were my friends.
Yeah. That's okay. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the programming and some of the on-air personalities.
Oh, yeah, and like I said, it's been mostly R&B, doing religious shows in the morning. And of course, there's been some
Did you have a favorite program at the station that you like listening to?
I guess, yeah, I like to listen to Greg Sampson's morning shows for the most part. He would do some different things, and I know he would do some birthday calls in the morning. Somebody would let him know, hey, my mother's got a birthday coming up tomorrow. Can you give her a call? And he says, okay, I'm going to call her at 7 a.m. And she wouldn't know, and he'd call her up, and they'd be listening to it, and she'd say, oh, I'm on the radio, and he'd say, yeah, it's your birthday, happy birthday, and he would do that, many times in the morning, each day, he'd be a different one, and that was popular. I remember that. It was fun listening to the people get excited and what have you.
Was it like a news talk morning show, or was it locally oriented? How did he mix in music and talk?
Oh, yeah, it was a mix of music and talk. I don't know. Let's see. Oh, and yeah, they do the music, but they also do a lot of sports broadcasting as well. Broadcasting basketball games, football games, and I'm, live the whole game. Randy Jones and sometimes another student would help him out, and they'd just, do the kibitzing and that's talking back and forth about the game and watch it, and just, play by play, calling that game, and you'd know at home exactly, and people all over would be listening to that.
So they broadcast live games?
Oh yeah, and not just the home games. It'd be away games being broadcast live. Of course, it was developed the technology to do all that. It didn't have it. Well, originally we did have it, but we had to do it on telephone lines, and it sounded like a telephone call. But
are we talking about high school, college, here at Elizabeth City? Those games?
Yeah, the college games. This university's games. And home games, away games, and of course the homecoming, and all of the championships and what have you, covering them, and that was something that was quite popular to do, and Randy handled that very well. Other than that, I guess formatting has been relatively steady. It just kind of follows the music trends at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were probably a little more older R&B back in the 80s and 90s, but that's what it was back in the 80s and 90s for the most part. But it's probably more modern now.
What encouraged that shift? What made it shift to follow more of the contemporary music scene?
Well, the music shifts. You got to go with it. I mean, you can't, play the same things over and over and over again. So you got to be playing the new music as it comes out. And so that's what everybody pretty much tries to do.
Was there a particular GM who said, "Okay, it's time to modernize here and stop doing this format or change to this genre"? Or did they all kind of stick with the same program?
Pretty much the same. Yeah, which it's never been really a forced format. It's been more open to what the operators wanted to do and what the operators wanted to play. I mean, we've had some jazz shows in the afternoon where somebody that's just a volunteer would bring their jazz collection of records into the station and, play from his jazz collection right there, on jazz in the afternoon on Sunday and that kind of thing.
So volunteers could have their own shows and shape the station.
Well, not just anybody, but yes. You had to go through the process to, make sure you can handle it and teach them a little bit about the equipment as well. And but yeah, they were open to that sort of thing. Absolutely.
Did you enjoy doing that? Did you enjoy teaching volunteers about the equipment or students about the equipment?
Very much so. That's been part of this job that I really enjoyed. Was, because we've got students. I mean, finally, the operators know exactly what to do, but, you might have 5 students working on something and something's just not working the way it's supposed to for them. And you go in and you find out, well, yeah, this setting, somebody changed it or something for another project. Just got to get it back to the way you're used to it. Sometimes it would just be new equipment, brand new equipment. Just put this in, this is how it's going to get your inputs to it and the outputs from it, and where, on the consoles, putting them up. And, yeah, and all the equipment changes, too. I mean, about every 10 years or so, you're going through changing equipments in there. So if the equipment be fresh, and they may have known the last one, but this new fresh equipment, now here comes new training again on people that really know what they're doing, but they still need a little bit of, well, what does this new box do? And, as we moved into the digital age and computers became more of it, that became more of a challenge for everyone. But it certainly became apparent very quickly that multi-tracking and editing with tapes and cutting and splicing, that was a thing of the past. Computers changed that completely. Keeping up with all of these things is just what we've had to do. And like I said, the operators, they got to keep up with it too. And yeah, it's a lot of fun just helping people and teaching, what I know about the equipment so that they can take with that and then they can, be creative and the artists they are, which I couldn't do. That's not my job. And but it all comes together.
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced working in this job? Not just technology, but, working with people. What was hard about doing radio?
Well, for me, the really hard part was dealing with managerial changes or station ownership changes. That's what hits hard, and it can hit everybody at the station hard. Sometimes very little may change. Sometimes a whole lot's going to change. And for the most part, it's kept a surprise in radio until everybody finds out, and it's done.
So change comes quickly.
Yeah, it comes quickly
for the staff.
And that most of the other changes, that's just keeping up with the times. But when you get an ownership change or managerial change, it's generally caused by an ownership change. But it can be quite different. And that, in public radio, of course, it's a little bit different than in commercial radio. In that respect, there's more stability, I suppose, in public radio because, well, they're not after the things that commercial radio seek. They have different goals. And I liked working in commercial radio, but I really enjoyed working in public radio much more. It was much more rewarding all around.
Who did the station answer to? So who were the higher-ups for this station? Were there issues with the folks granting public radio charters, or is it the FCC, or is it just the chancellor? Is it, what is the hierarchy?
Chancellor pretty much calls it around here, I believe, and of course everything's got to be within the requirements of the FCC.
Any challenges ever with the FCC for you?
Let's see. Not really, no. No. We've never had any real problems. I know when the station first went through its power increase, there were some interference complaints that needed to be dealt with, with the station bleeding into people's electronics in their homes because they're close by. And we resolved, I had to go in and deal with all of those one by one in their homes, and they did it. The station did it, had no problems with doing that. Of course, the FCC requires it up to a point, but they didn't. They did whatever they needed to do to resolve all the issues here, and they have, and it stayed there. Of course, that was back in the analog world, and as an analog broadcaster, analog, it can affect analog no matter what it is. TV can affect radio, radio can affect TV, reception I'm speaking of, and it can be a problem. But in the digital, if things went digital, all of that kind of just went away. We don't get that kind of analog RF interference with each other anymore. There's probably new kinds of interferences going on, but not like that.
When did the station go digital here?
Station went digital transmission in 2009. It was 2009. There was a grant from Available that the general manager here, Delbert Gray at the time, told me to look into. And so as I looked into it, it was a grant for, to upgrade your analog radio station into the, what they call the in-band on-channel digital radio stations. And after checking it all out, it looked like with just some additional funds added in, this project could be completed pretty much with the grant. And so I went ahead and completed all the paperwork, and we sent it in, and we received the grant, and all the extra little things that go along with it, and we got our station course. It still had to kick in quite a bit, here locally to get it done, but got all new transmitter equipment brought in, and the studio transmitter links that are required, because of that change, and it developed a fully digital transmission path from the console, right on out to the transmitter. But it all starts out analog, and because that's where it begins. Microphones are analog.
Now, you also worked on the TV side here as well, right?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about the difference between working at a college station for TV versus college station for radio?
Well, the differences are mostly technical for
That's
me.
fine.
Components of a video signal are quite a bit more than just an audio signal. And there's a whole lot more synchronizations involved that you just don't, it's not required in audio. And the station had received licenses for 2 low-power radio stations. And they were, I guess, having trouble fully beginning the projects, and some time had passed. And I received, as engineers, we received little flyers from the FCC, notices from lawyers and such, this, that, and the other, about changes and what have you. And the FCC put out a notice that if you've got a license on a station, and at the end of this year you're not on the air, and you haven't been on the air for 12 months, you lose your license. And of course, I went and notified the chancellor here about all of that. And got that ball rolling. They said, well, we need to get going here. And so we went ahead and completed everything we needed to do. I mean, a whole lot of this had already been done. I mean, transmitters had been purchased and installed, studio had been built, but just getting everything tied together, the studio transmitter linked on, getting power to everything and actually on the air, because they may have been installed, but they've never been turned on. And so we had to get all of that done and get it done within a few months, really. And so they decided to let one of the stations go, since they didn't feel they had the programming to warrant two full stations. So they let one of the stations go, and we kept the Channel 18 as our main station here, and got transmitters all fired up and the cameras going and everything, and got our studio transmitter link in place with the fiber optic, with the assistance of the telecommunications department here. We got a fiber optic link between our studio and the transmitter site, and that put us on the air.
What kind of TV programming did the station run?
Mostly educational stuff. It started out very slowly. We did some ball games, but that also started out very slowly. But eventually, we got a little more used to what was going on, and we started producing live broadcasts of the ball games, the football games, the basketball games, all various events around the college and what have you. Started broadcasting some of the events in town here for the town, for Elizabeth City, and eventually we got a satellite dish, which allowed us to have full 24/7 programming that we didn't have to originate ourselves, which, that for a little small station with just one person running it or two people running it, it's hard to come up with 24 hours of programming, and it's all coming from your desk. That's hard to do.
Would that be public television programming, or what did the satellite help you to broadcast?
Oh, it was also somewhat educational. Where did we start? I don't know. We've been through many different affiliates, or if that's a correct term, yeah. And which one it started at, I don't know. And I'm not even sure it hasn't changed since I talked with her in Melba last. I believe it was the America One Network, if it's still called that. It changed its name a couple of times. And but that allowed us to get 24/7 programming, and we could stay on the air because, originally even the radio station was signing off at midnight because, it was difficult to keep it manned 24 hours a day with volunteers and what have you. And then, maybe some students. You can't keep the students there all night either. And so the automation systems allowed us to go 24/7 on the radio side, and initially the satellite systems allowed us to go 24/7 on the television side. And of course, eventually automation systems, we got those involved at the TV station as well, and could, switch in and out of programming during the day and, run our own programming, as mixing it just back and forth. It could be done. And just keeping it going that way. And again, eventually, let me think. When did I might have misspoke myself. I said 2009 for the radio station went digital. It was before then. The television station we taught the television station to digital broadcasting in 2009. Oh, it was, I'm going want to say somewhere in the early 2000s. I can't recall exactly when it was.
For radio?
The radio station right now, yeah. I have to think about what general manager made it happen and who was there at the time. I know a little bit. I can't recall.
I think I remember that time for TV. Everyone had to switch to the digital antennas or converters.
You remember that, huh?
So I want to talk a little bit about, what life is like outside of work. Were you living locally here in Elizabeth City?
Well, I live in Curry, Tuck. It's a couple counties over. It's about 25 miles from here. 25. So it's not too far away. And, well...
Do you have a family?
No, my parents are gone. And, like I said, I'm not sure where my sister is now.
Never had a life partner, marriage, anything like that?
Oh, yes. I was married for 46 years to my life partner.
Can you tell me a little bit about them?
My wife?
Please.
Gonna be rough. No.
What was her name?
Met my wife in high school, and we were high school sweethearts, and got married in 1972, just as I was going into the Air Force.
So she's traveled with you along this journey?
Yes. We lived together in Mississippi in the Air Force for 4 years. And then, like I said, our families were here. So we came back here and worked at various things. And
what was her name?
Patty. Her name was Patricia. And she has passed away recently, and it's been a terrible loss.
It's hard.
But I had 46 great years.
That's incredible. What did you and Patty like to do for fun?
Mostly we like to go down towards the beach to Nag's Head or Hatteras. We would surf fish. Sometimes we'd just go down on the beach and sit on the beach and swim. And sometimes we'd just go down there and take in a restaurant or two and go back home. And then sometimes we go down there for a week at a time and, rent one of the houses down there.
Nice having the beach so close.
Oh, yeah. That was probably one of our favorite things to do, was to get down there. And because we'd both been doing it since high school and just kept it up. Sometimes we even tried surfing a little bit in the 80s, but getting too old to do that anymore. At least I was. A lot of people can keep it up, but I couldn't.
I was going to ask, when did your surfing career end?
Yeah, it really ended when I went into the Air Force. I tried to resurrect it a couple times, but it was a failure. It was fun, but not anymore.
Did Patty work?
Yes.
What was she doing?
Patty held many jobs. She learned printing, early printing down in Mississippi. And she brought that skill back here with her and worked at Donning Company Publishers there in Norfolk for many, many years. And then she decided she wanted to be a paralegal. So she went to school for that. I guess about 30 years ago. She completed that and became a paralegal and worked with a lawyer in Virginia Beach for many, many years. They had a good practice and just stayed there until they retired. And after that, Patty had semi-retired, but there was a farmer down here in Curry Tuck, and he needed some help with the books at his farm, and we had been mutual friends with this other group for over 30 years, and we kind of got together, and Patty said, because I didn't say she'd also been a bookkeeper, an accountant, not a CPA, but a full charge bookkeeper. And so she went out and became a bookkeeper / paralegal for his agriculture business until he passed away. And then she went ahead and retired from that. And we had fun for a little while, and then it was over.
No kids for you guys?
No, we never had kids.
Dogs?
Don't get me started on my dogs. Yeah, we had some dogs. It's a bird dog. We had a bird dog, and we both learned how to train bird dogs and duck dogs.
It's for hunting.
For hunting and retrieving, yeah.
What breeds?
And English setter is what we had. Did some work with some Brittany Spaniels and some pointers as well, and Labrador retrievers. And but never as a professional, but pretty good amateur at it. And Patty was as good as me. We read the same books, and we learned the same methods, and we did the same things, and we were both very successful at what we tried to do. And it was great fun taking a dog, and it's what they want to do. You just gotta, because you can't teach them. They got to know this stuff. I mean, it's if they don't know it, you can't teach it. But you can sure bring it out in them. That's for sure. And it was great fun.
So if you had to pass on sort of one piece of wisdom, word of wisdom or advice for an up-and-coming engineer in radio today, what kind of advice would you pass on?
Most important advice would be to get involved. It seems to be, from what I can read, recruiting very few people into the field. And that's evident by the people I know. The engineers I know are taking on so many stations because there's no one else available to do it. And it's becoming something that'd be the number one thing. Get into it, because the opportunities are there. That's for sure. And it's not a field that you're ever going to get bored in. It is so varied and always changing.
How would you like to be remembered for your time at WRVS?
Just that I hoped everybody was okay with the way I handle things.
Just kind of did your job and did it well.
I hope so. I tried to. It was my goal.
I know we've touched on quite a bit, but is there anything you want to share formally for the record here before we close out this interview? Anything we missed?
No. I can't think of anything. I wish I could remember the exact time the radio station went digital. But in my old memory, the two events are kind of overlapping on each other, between the radio and the TV. Which one was first? I know which one was first, of course, but I don't remember exactly when. And it was 2009 for the TV, and I can't recall when it was for the radio.
That's okay.
Earlier. Well, it was when Telford Gray. Oh, no. I'd have to think about it. Real hard. I imagine Melba can tell us.
Yeah, she could.
We'll find out.
Well, Benjamin, I really appreciate your time today. It's been really great talking with you and learning about your experiences at WRVS, and hope you enjoyed it a little bit too.
Oh, yeah, it's always good to reminisce.
Okay, have a great day.
You too. Thank you.